This is TWiT.
All right, so this story has something that like I said just a few moments ago, I had never heard of before, but it really caught my attention. And in reading through this story, which really is written kind of in many ways like a novel, like it has, like, it's very descriptive. I just love how it was written. It turns out, even if kidnapping is virtual, as the name implies, it's still very terrifying for its victims and leaves a lasting mark, if not monetarily, but kind of traumatically. It's very, very interesting. Joining us to talk about this phenomenon is David Kushner who wrote this article for Business Insider. David is, of course, an author of many books, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But welcome to the show, David.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to get you on. I appreciate you taking a few minutes to talk to us about this.
Sure.
You start things off in your article kind of setting the stage based around a gentleman who you name Richard Mendelstein. The name is changed, of course, for the purposes of the article. But set the scene for us, because it really does kind of demonstrate how something that on its surface could seem like a little harmless, like, oh, so, it's a prank phone call at the end of the day. But really, it has some dramatic impacts on, on the family, on his life going forward, essentially. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, completely. I mean, he was just, in the Princeton, New Jersey area, working at home, as most of us do these days, it seems. And he gets a phone call on his cell phone. And it's from a number he doesn't recognize. And he's the guy who actually will report junk calls, that are coming in. And he's an engineer and all that. But when he picked it up this time and he heard his daughter calling out for help, saying, help me, daddy, and so on. And then the next thing you know, a man grabbed the phone and demanded a ransom, and demanded that this guy's not talk to his wife, not respond to any texts, and that he has to now go get this ransom money if he wants to see his daughter alive.
And what's instantly interesting about this, as we kind of read through your article, is the reality that the daughter is actually not on the other side of the call, right? This is ultimately, it's a numbers game. It's a scam. It's a hoax. Someone is calling looking for a Mendelstein to be on the other side that buys into it hook, line, and sinker. And part of the challenge, like I'm a parent, I've got two children, and I think about, I try and put myself into that position of picking up the phone and having someone saying, we've kidnapped your daughter, we demand a ransom. And then also not only just hearing that, because that in itself might sound a little suspicious depending on the situation, but actually hearing some reaction that sounds like my daughter or whatever, that's frightening. How does that work if that person doesn't actually have the victim? Why is that so convincing?
Well, these were the questions that I had. I actually knew this family who this had happened to, and I was obviously, shocked by it, and then found out, wait, this is happening all over the country. It's been happening for a while. It's incredibly widespread, and I assumed it was a lot more sophisticated in terms of how this was being done. But really, it's just cold calling. And, a lot of people who they call won't have kids, right? So they're going to hang up. And then other people will hang up because they're suspicious or what have you. They just don't buy it. But all they need is one person. And in terms of, in this case, for example, when he related the story to me, the victim, he said, I heard my daughter's voice, but it really wasn't her voice. It was a recording of just a canned recording of a young woman crying for help. But in his mind, it was his daughter. So when his wife asked him what's going on, he said, our daughter has been kidnapped. And she said, how do you know? And he said, because I spoke with her. So, you can't underestimate what fear does to your perception.
Absolutely. I can only imagine, hearing those words, hearing the cry. It's almost like your mind fills in the gaps. Your reason in that moment is overshadowed by this adrenaline kind of adrenaline-filled moment. And, we don't take the time to rationally kind of make that analysis. Like, was that actually the voice of my child? Was that higher or lower pitched or whatever the case? Doesn't matter. It's like we've already decided, like, worst case scenario, I need to save my daughter.
And
you've basically gone into the fight or flight.
Yes.
So there is no rational, and it's very easy. And and I spent a lot of time reporting on this. It's very easy to think that you never fall for this. Mm-hmm. But that's what all of the victims thought too. And I think it's just just being vulnerable in those moments.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe that these bad actors, they know that's how humans are going to react. This is sort of the fight or flight, and it's an instant type of reaction. But my question to you, with this happening, what exactly is the end game for the people doing these acts?
Yeah, well, money. And so basically what they're going to do is keep you on the other end of the line as long as they can. You'll go to a money wiring facility. You'll wire it to some kind of middle person, who will pick it up, and then it'll go, to the people who are behind this. But they're trying to get as much money as they can, and they are very shrewd about it because they're not asking these victims for tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. They may be asking for $4,000 or $5,000, and the reason they do that is because it's enough that they can get somebody to pay it.
Right.
And so, everything is very, very calculated, and they know what they're doing.
Wow, no kidding. You also detail kind of how this is happening a little bit later in your piece. You you show that a lot, at least in some of these cases, these calls are being made from prison. How exactly does that, like, what are the machinations of how that actually works?
Well, that's the crazy twist that happens is when, initially these cases start happening first in Beverly Hills. And they were really confounding everybody. And cops were falling victim, these kind of socialites were falling victim, you name it. And then it spread over to a wealthy suburb outside of Houston. So, they didn't really know what was happening or why. And what they eventually figured out was that there was this kind of kingpin who'd come up with this system. And the system was to distribute burner phones in Mexican prisons. And because the prisoners are the ones who have all day to sit there on phones and make cold calls. And the guys who came up with this scam had been in a prison in Mexico, and they basically came up with this idea. And it's from their vantage point, it's kind of a great idea because when I spoke with the FBI, they basically said to me, what are we supposed to do? These guys are in prison. We can't throw them in jail. They're already there. So it's a very confounding situation for the FBI.
Yeah, this sounds like a massive upgrade to the scam that we're used to hearing with people calling you to say, hey, your computer has a virus and, let me walk you through this. These are people that are already behind bars. They got nothing to lose.
Nothing to lose, right?
And more to gain for someone else. This is just really, really fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and basically, the advice that the FBI has is just hang up. That's actually the messaging that they're doing, because there really isn't a lot you can do to prevent it from happening. And like I said, you'd be shocked about the numbers of people out there who this has happened to in some form, and a lot of people don't talk about it, even though it has happened.
I wonder if there's some sort of like a catch rate, if you will. If someone answers the phone and doesn't fall for it, is that logged some type of way? I know they're using burner phones, but I wonder if there's some type of tracking or reporting back that says,
they're just. Yeah, exactly. The FBI, they're again, like when I first heard this, And, there were rumors going around town that that the perpetrator had ripped some audio from the kids, Instagram. So that would make sense, right? That's how they may kind of create a deep fake to get them to believe it. But again, it's completely these are unsophisticated crimes kind of by design. All you really need is a phone and some good social engineering skills, as they're called.
Time to find the one that's going to fall for it.
So I mean, I think in answer to your question, I think they're just like, hey, go through these set of numbers methodically, and they maybe just checking them off in a notebook. But it's really cold calling, and they just need one person.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask about the whole, you mentioned deepfakes, but I think in hearing what you just said, it really doesn't matter. Like my mind immediately jumped to, okay, so then, people might be suspicious because they don't, that's not my daughter. Like I hear that voice, whatever, hang up or whatever. But it really doesn't matter. At the end of the day, like you said, it's a numbers game. Even if they were to do a deep fake and get the voice of that person, that's still... it's still such a small number compared. They probably have the same success rate, just doing it kind of dumbly or blindly the way they're doing it right now. Yeah. And that's kind of frustrating.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a con, they're con artists. I mean, the way I think of it is that in hacking terms, I mean, I think they're just phishing out there. It's not spear phishing, but the idea of spear phished virtual kidnapping to me is maybe one iteration of this. If it does get to the point where you are targeting certain individuals and you are manipulating, audio, video, which is pretty feasible. So, these things always seem kind of far out until they start happening. I mean, 10 years ago, I wrote a story about the first guy who was hacking webcams. And, that just seems so bizarre at the time. And we, now we kind of take that for granted.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that because I have a story coming up later about Wise that is entirely about that. Very in the news today. This keeps happening. Yeah, exactly. Right. Lastly, like you mentioned the book, just a second ago. You're an author of a number of books. One book that you wrote in the last few years is called Alligator Candy, and actually, kind of and by your admission, you mentioned this in your article, but you detail your investigation of the disappearance of your own brother when you were a child. So it really kind of ties into the subject matter of what you're writing about here. So I guess I'm curious from that perspective, from your perspective, which is a lot closer to this than I'd say most people reading the article. Yeah. What are your thoughts about this scam on a personal level, about the impact that this has on people who are on the other end of it?
Yeah, I mean, it makes me empathetic to it. And I understand kind of as a journalist who's been on this from the inside, what happens within a family when those emotions get triggered. And, and so I understand that through my own experience, but I just think it really speaks to how insidious this crime is, that they are, tapping this most vulnerable kind of primal emotion that's in everyone and just seeing if they can exploit it. Yeah,
indeed. Fascinating stuff. I love your writing, David. Thank you so much for coming onto the show and telling us a little bit about this piece and your other work. Of course, David Kushner. Search for his work. If people actually want to find your work, where would you point them?
You should go to my website, which is just davidkushner.com.
Awesome. Thank you again, David, and best of luck. We'll talk with you soon.
Thanks. All right.
Take care.